Sarah Fleming's entire life fit into one trunk, including her wedding dress, now sitting in storage because her fiancé's family decided that 42 meant worthless. She was humiliated, left on a bench as strangers whispered and watched. But then, a widowed cowboy walked up, tipped his hat, and said 7 words that changed everything. Would you help me read this? Verse. On a blistering summer afternoon in 1885, James MacKinnon had merely intended to gather supplies at Clearwater Station. Since the loss of his wife 3 years prior, a smile had eluded him. Yet there she remained, a bride adorned in white, abandoned as her groom's family deemed 42 too advanced in age for matrimony. Sarah Fleming journeyed 2,000 miles in the name of love, only to discover the bitter sting of abandonment. At times, the most profound gifts life offers us wear the mask of sorrow. As James drew near the station, neither of them realized that their lives were on the brink of a profound transformation. What compelled this rugged cowboy to cast his gaze upon a stranger and resolve to wed her on that very day? Before we dive back in, please share where you're joining us from. If this tale resonates with you, be sure to subscribe, for tomorrow I have something truly extraordinary in store. Dawn unfurled over the Wyoming prairie, brushing the sky with hues of amber and rose. James MacKinnon had been awake for hours, his roughened fingers wandering over the silver locket that dangled from a nail beside his bed. Each morning unfolded in this manner, observing the sun ascend, caressing Mary's locket, compelling himself to confront yet another day. The floorboards groaned under the weight of his boots as he traversed toward the kitchen. The house loomed large, an expanse of silence enveloping it. Even after 3 years, he occasionally found himself calling out, "Ah, morning, darling," only to be reminded of the silence that followed. The coffee pot lingered, unwashed since yesterday, a solitary cup's remnants of grounds clinging to the bottom in a parched embrace. The ranch was alive with activity beyond its walls. In the barn, young Tommy Wilson, the farmhand, was already at work, the steady sound of milk splashing into the pail setting the cadence for the morning's tasks. The boy had proven to be a blessing over the years. Yet James understood that he couldn't sustain the support for much longer if circumstances didn't improve. "Good morning, Mr. MacKinnon," Tommy called, his voice reverberating through the barn's dim, dusty corners. "The mail arrived early yesterday evening, just after you had turned in for the night. It was left resting on the fence post." James inclined his head, reaching for the envelope adorned with the bank's letterhead. He could discern its contents without ever lifting the seal. This is likely the 3rd notice. The drought had taken a heavy toll on all, yet it was Mary's astute bookkeeping and meticulous planning that spared the ranch from suffering more than its peers. He slid the letter into his shirt pocket, leaving it unopened. The journey to town today would demand a considerable amount of courage, even without the weight of the bank's demands adding to his already heavy burden. In the other pocket, the supply list was brief. Coffee, sugar, ammunition, essentials transforming into luxuries as the wolves prowled ever closer, a stark reminder of the shifting tides of necessity. "Oh, Tommy," he called out, "see, now I worked on those fence posts in the south pasture today. The wolf signs are getting stronger." The morning passed in a blur of routine, mending, feeding, and checking the weak spots in the fence line. From time to time, his hand would wander to his shirt pocket, brushing against the tangible weight of that unopened letter. Mary would have possessed the insight to navigate the situation. She consistently did. Within the confines of his home, James found himself gazing into the modest mirror perched above the wash basin, striving to bring order to his graying beard. His reflection gazed back, aged and weary, eyes burdened by the toll of countless solitary days. The silver locket drew his gaze once more, compelling him to extend his hand toward it. The clasp resisted a bit, as it always did, before unveiling the worn photograph nestled inside. Mary's smile, captured in a moment, gazed back at him. They had captured the image merely 6 months prior to the fever claiming her. She laughed at something he had said, her eyes crinkling at the corners in that familiar way that always made his heart skip a beat. "What advice would you offer me, Mary?" he murmured softly to the vacant space around him. With banks tightening their grip and ranches succumbing to despair, the weight of solitude grows heavier on my weary heart. Silence enveloped the scene, punctuated only by the faint lowing of cattle and the distant sound of Tommy whistling from the barn. With a soft click, James shut the locket, yet he refrained from returning it to its resting place on the nail. Instead, he tucked it into his pocket, nestled next to the bank's letter. Perhaps the moment had arrived to embrace both his history and the ambiguity of what lay ahead. The wagon required some attention. The rear wheel had developed a slight wobble, yet it would need to endure for the journey to Clearwater Station. As he secured the harnesses on the horses, James mentally revisited his checklist yet again. He had to return before the sun dipped below the horizon. In the dimming light of dusk, the wolves grew increasingly audacious. "I'll take care of things here, Mr. MacKinnon," Tommy reassured him, sensing the concern. Before his employer's gaze, "I have my father's old rifle ready should those wolves come prowling around." James offered a slight nod, recognizing the boy's insight. Tommy carried within him a narrative steeped in loss. His mother was taken by the same fever that had claimed Mary. It was perhaps that collective sorrow that rendered the young man a source of solace over these past years. The sun ascended steadily as James embarked on his journey, the wagon's wheels carving well-known grooves into the parched soil. He had embarked on this journey countless times in the past, often with Mary by his side, her pragmatic voice mapping out their acquisitions, her soft wit transforming the voyage into a fleeting experience. Today he rode in solitude, the bank's letters smoldering in one pocket, while Mary's locket hung heavily in the other. The morning's beauty and Tommy's cheerful farewell failed to dispel the shadow that lingered in his heart. Unbeknownst to James MacKinnon, the approaching sunset would herald a transformation that would alter the course of his life forever. At long last, destiny had made its choice, settling on 3. After years of mourning, it became clear that sometimes the response to a heartfelt prayer arrives unexpectedly. Adorned in a wedding dress at a train station, Sarah Fleming sat stiffly in her train seat, the crumpled telegram searing a hole in her reticule. She had perused it countless times in the last 3 days, the words now etched indelibly into her memory. The situation evolved. Cease the worries surrounding family matters. Concerning the matter of age, cease recommending the cancellation of the journey. Cease the burden of regrets. Cease. The landscape outside the window rushed by in a haze, each passing mile drawing her away from her life in Boston and nearer to what was meant to be her wedding day. She adjusted her traveling skirts, the finest navy blue wool now creased from days of sitting, and lightly caressed the simple cameo at her throat. At 42, she had selected it with great care, aiming to convey a sense of dignity rather than desperation. "More tea, miss?" The porter's kind face emerged at her elbow, yet Sarah merely shook her head. Since the telegram arrived in Chicago interrupting her journey west, her stomach had contained nothing but weak tea. "Too old," she murmured to her reflection in the window glass, as though the passage of time could define the value of a heart. The other passengers had shifted numerous times since Boston, yet she had stayed, observing the stations materialize and fade away, each one drawing her nearer to Clearwater. She might have chosen to turn back in Chicago or Omaha, or at any of the numerous stops where she could have acknowledged her defeat and returned to the tranquility of her life teaching at Miss Prendergast's school for young ladies. Yet something within her, be it pride, hope, or sheer stubbornness, compelled her to continue down this westward journey. The very impulse that had compelled her to respond to Herbert's advertisement in the Matrimonial Times 6 months prior, established businessman seeks educated lady companion, age immaterial, character essential. Their correspondence had embodied all her aspirations, featuring thoughtful discussions on literature, aligned perspectives on education, and subtle suggestions of burgeoning affection woven throughout the text. Herbert appeared to be a stark contrast to the Boston men who had relegated her to the status of a shelf-worn spinster, too engrossed in her books and teaching to attract a husband in her younger days. What lies ahead? At Clearwater Station, the conductor's voice echoed through the car, jolting Sarah from her daydream. She collected her petite suitcase. She had dispatched her trunk in advance, a further indignity looming before her, and adjusted her hat with quaking fingers. The telegram appeared to taunt her from its resting spot within her reticule. Concerns within the family about aging. Herbert's mother, now a widow along with his unmarried sisters, cast a discerning glance at the age listed on the marriage license application. They swiftly concluded that their 48-year-old brother deserved a partner who was more fitting. A person of a younger age, one who possesses more years ahead for the possibility of bearing children. The train's whistle sliced through the tranquil afternoon air as they drew near to Clearwater. Through the window, Sarah glimpsed the town, a church steeple rising proudly, a general store standing sentinel, and scattered houses bravely resisting the expansive Wyoming prairie. This was meant to be her sanctuary. These streets she would have traversed as Mrs. Herbert Crawford. Instead, she would ascend that platform as a fool, a middle-aged woman who had the audacity to dream of love, only to discover her own shortcomings, the trunk containing her wedding. The dress and household linens would serve as a lingering reminder of her humiliation, awaiting the moment she could orchestrate their return shipment to the east. The train came to a halt, shuddering as steam escaped in a soft, hissing symphony. Sarah stayed in her seat while the other passengers collected their things and made their way to the exits. Through the window she observed families embracing, travelers scattering, life unfolding, as though her own world had not just crumbled into pieces. At last, as the car approached emptiness, she rose, her legs heavy and unyielding, reluctant to propel her into this unfamiliar reality. The porter re-emerged, worry etched across his dark eyes. "Do you require assistance with that bag, miss?" Sarah grasped the valise tightly. "Closer." "No, thank you. I can manage." Just as she always had, alone, the platform boards creaked beneath her feet as she descended the train steps. The afternoon sun blazed, a stark contrast to the gentle Boston summer she remembered. A bead of perspiration traced down her neck, yet she refused to dab at it. "Ladies do not perspire," Miss Prendergast would often declare. Ladies persevered. The station master approached, his expression warm yet tinged with unease. "Miss Fleming, Mr. Crawford asked me to, that is, there's a message. I've received it, thank you." Sarah interrupted, her voice unwavering despite the heat of emotion rising within her. She could not endure another look of sympathy, another reminder of her own folly. She walked to a bench in the cool shade of the station, placing her valise beside her like a loyal companion. Her wedding dress lay in that trunk hidden away in the station's storage room, swathed in tissue paper and aspirations, which had turned out to be as fleeting as the dawn fog. The telegram crackled as she moved, its existence as undeniable as the emptiness gnawing at her heart. It was astonishing to consider how a mere slip of paper could bear such weight, capable of delivering words heavy enough to drown a soul. James MacKinnon's wagon came to a halt outside the Clearwater Station, coinciding perfectly with the afternoon train's departing whistle. He delved into his coat pocket, his fingers grazing over Mary's locket before finding the familiar texture of his well-worn Bible. This small book had been his steadfast companion throughout the last 3 years, its pages marked by both sorrow and comfort. The station platform emptied rapidly, people rushing to evade the oppressive August heat, save for one solitary figure, a woman clad in a navy traveling dress, poised and upright on a bench in the cool shadows. There was an intriguing quality to her stillness that drew his gaze. She was not anticipating anyone's arrival. She bore the expression of one well aware that solitude was her only companion. "Afternoon, James," Station Master Peterson called out, mopping his brow with a bandana. "Supply list for Thompson's store?" "Aye," James replied, though his gaze wandered persistently to the woman. She carried herself with grace, even though the weight of defeat was palpable in her shoulders. A well-known kind of defeat, he encountered it in his own reflection frequently enough. "It's unfortunate what happened with Crawford," Peterson murmured, trailing his eyes along with James's. "The entire town has been abuzz with chatter about it. A woman journeyed from Boston to unite in marriage with Herbert Crawford, only to have him withdraw, citing her age as the reason. If you ask me, it's all down to his mother. That woman could freeze hell twice over." James's grip on his Bible grew firmer. He understood its essence, to experience love taken from him, though the culprit was fever rather than the malice of humanity. Said she sits there, waiting. The trainees won't arrive until Thursday, leaving her with nowhere to turn, that poor soul. I suggested sending my boy to the boarding house, yet she declined, a proud sort. James observed as the woman, Miss Fleming he assumed, retrieved something from her reticule. A telegram, it appeared. Her fingers caressed it with the same meticulous care he reserved for Mary's letters, now nestled between the pages of his Bible. Has she eaten? He was taken aback by the question just as much as Peterson was. She has turned down everything except tea since her arrival this morning. It brings to mind you after Mary. That same quiet resilience. James nodded slowly, his free hand brushing against the locket in his pocket. Mary had often remarked on the enigmatic nature of divine intervention. She had found solace in the pages of this very Bible during those feverish nights of torment. Recall Job, she had murmured softly. Following the depths of his anguish, the divine bestowed upon him a bounty twice that of his trials. He realized he was approaching the bench, his feet moving of their own accord, before any deliberate thought crossed his mind. The sound of his boots striking the wooden planks surely reached her ears. She lifted her gaze, unveiling eyes the hue of summer sage, tinged with redness yet devoid of tears. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat slightly, "James MacKinnon here. I was hoping you could assist me with a matter." Those sage-green eyes flickered with surprise at his approach, yet her voice remained unwavering. "How may I assist you, Mr. MacKinnon?" He retrieved the Bible from his pocket, its leather worn and polished from countless touches. "There is a passage my late wife cherished, one that speaks of new beginnings. This morning has been a quest, yet my reading skills seem to elude me, and it was a lie." He had memorized every word in that book, yet an undeniable urge stirred within him to connect with this woman, who moved through the world with a grace that bore the weight of her wounds. "I'm a teacher by profession," she said, warmth lacing her voice. "I'd be happy to help you search." "Sarah Fleming," she added after a moment, extending her hand. He took it gently, feeling the strength in her grip, a delicate yet firm connection. As she opened the Bible, several pressed flowers tumbled from between its pages, Mary's bookmarks. Miss Fleming caught them before they could drift away, handling them with instinctive care. Indian paintbrush," she murmured gently. We don't have these in Boston. My wife adored them, claiming they were God's way of painting the prairie." James took a seat beside her on the bench, mindful to maintain an appropriate distance. She pressed one for each spring we shared together. Miss Fleming's fingers quivered ever so slightly as she made her return. The flowers to their resting place. For how long has she been absent? 3 years come this October. Heat envelops the body, a relentless surge of warmth that signals something amiss. "I'm sorry," she said, and he could sense the sincerity in her voice. Not the empty pity of neighbors who had never faced true sorrow, but the empathy of one who understood how grief could carve out a heart. They lingered in a serene quietude for a brief moment. The sacred text lay open before them. Amidst the station's typical afternoon hustle, their bench appeared to inhabit a realm of its own. "And my mother always said that God saves his greatest surprises for those who believe their story is already written," Miss Fleming finally uttered, her voice a mere whisper. "I'm starting to question whether she might have been right." The station clock ticked steadily above them, its hands indicating 3 o'clock. Sarah had been reading from James's Bible for nearly an hour, her clear voice infusing familiar verses with renewed vitality. Neither had brought up the telegram, which lay forgotten in the background. On the bench beside them she read aloud, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans designed to bring you success and safeguard your well-being. Plans to give you hope and a future." Her voice faltered just a touch on the word future. James observed her, her profile illuminated by the soft afternoon light. She had taken off her hat while engrossed in her reading, unveiling strands of chestnut hair that glimmered with silver at the temples. Much like his Mary, she carried her years with elegance, each line around her eyes narrating tales of laughter and tears experienced to the fullest. The station clock chimed the quarter hour, surprising them both. James's mind raced with thoughts of his supply list, the waiting wagon, and the wolves that would soon be prowling by dusk. Yet the very idea of leaving her here alone was unbearable. "Miss Fleming," he began, then hesitated, searching for the right words. "Sarah, I know our acquaintance is fresh, yet I sense a connection between us, a mutual understanding." She shut the Bible with care, her fingertips brushing against its weathered surface. "Perhaps we do, Mr. MacKinnon." "James," he replied gently, "I prefer to speak plainly, so let me express this straightforwardly. My ranch lies a mere 10 miles to the west of this very spot. It's battling, much like everything else around here, yet it's good land, genuine land." The clock ticked above them, counting each heartbeat of silence. "And I've spent these 3 years in solitude," he went on, and I've come to realize that there is a distinction between merely surviving and truly living." Then, as he observed her seated there, he reached into his pocket to caress Mary's locket, sensing in that moment that his departed wife was bestowing her approval. Then sometimes God puts 2 broken pieces together to make something whole again. Sarah's grip on the Bible tightened. "Mr. MacKinnon, James, are you implying what I believe you're implying?" And I assert that any man foolish enough to believe that 42 years of existence renders a woman unworthy of love does not merit the treasure of your time, James declared, turning to meet her gaze completely. I may be a stranger to you, but I am a man who knows the worth of a heart that has weathered storms and retained its strength. A gentle breeze rustled the pressed flowers, revealing themselves from the pages of the Bible. The station clock ticked away another quarter hour. Are you... Sarah's voice quivered ever so slightly. Are you proposing marriage, Mr. MacKinnon? I am. He smiled, an expression that felt both unfamiliar and perfectly fitting on his face. Son, I understand this may seem abrupt, perhaps even reckless, yet I've come to realize that life often doesn't afford us the luxury of deliberation. At times one must heed the profound insights of the heart. Sarah. She glanced at the telegram resting beside her, then turned her gaze back to James. I don't seek charity, sir, nor do I desire rescue, just as little as I wish for a substitute for what I've lost. He answered with sincerity. I'm extending an offer of partnership, of understanding, a possibility for both of us to start anew. The station master had ceased his pretense of indifference, his customary sweeping abandoned as he stood motionless with his broom. A handful of townsfolk remained on the platform, captivated by the peculiar spectacle that was taking shape. Your ranch, Sarah said with caution. Did you mention it while struggling? It is. I won't deceive you regarding that. I was an educator once, prior to embarking on this journey. So now I have a knack for numbers, and I've long dreamed of establishing a school for the children in our community. A glimmer of hope danced in her eyes, igniting a warmth in James's heart. Is that something you might think about? I would contemplate anything that brings that spark in your gaze, Miss Fleming. The station clock tolled 4, its resonant chimes echoing through the now hushed platform. Sarah lifted her gaze to it, then turned her attention back to James. They'll call us both mad, she murmured. People have a tendency to say many things. The question is, what does your heart whisper? She brushed her fingers over the cameo resting at her throat, then straightened her shoulders with resolve. My heart whispers that often the most captivating tales begin with a conclusion, and maybe my mother was indeed correct about the unexpected gifts from the divine. James rose, extending his hand to her. Then, with a gentle resolve, he addressed Miss Sarah Fleming. Would you grant me the honor of becoming my wife? Is it today? Should you be inclined? The clock ticked once, twice, 3 times before. Her hand found its way into his, a gentle connection that spoke volumes. Yes, Mr. James MacKinnon, I believe I would. The town clerk's office was a modest chamber tucked away in the rear of Clearwater's courthouse, filled to the brim with filing cabinets and imbued with the scent of dust and aged paper. Herbert Mills, the clerk for 2 decades, glanced up from his ledger as James and Sarah stepped inside, trailed by the enthusiastic station master Peterson. In search of a marriage license? The James said with a calm assurance, his hand resting firmly on Sarah's elbow. The pen of Mills fell with a clatter upon his desk. A union. Today. But, Miss Fleming, I thought... He found his gaze drifting to the incomplete license for her canceled wedding, still resting on his desk. He'll need to draft a new one, Sarah remarked softly, her chin raised with a quiet dignity. Distinctive bridegroom. The clerk stumbled over his papers, a visible air of confusion surrounding him. But the waiting period, the usual procedures... Herb, James interjected. You've known me for 15 years, and my family even longer. I'm requesting your assistance in ensuring we execute this correctly and without delay. Mills glanced between them, his expressive eyes absorbing James's steadfast resolve and Sarah's serene demeanor. Is this related to Crawford's mother? Because if she's pressured you, Miss Fleming... No one has pressured me, Mr. Mills. Sarah's voice was resolute. This is my choice, my second chance. James sensed her fingers tighten on his arm at those words, and he gently covered her hand with his own. The unadorned act appeared to persuade Mills more profoundly than any spoken phrase ever could. Well then, the clerk remarked, retrieving a pristine form, let's see what we can accomplish. The sound of his pen gliding across the paper resonated in the cramped office as he meticulously inscribed their information. With a slight tremor, Sarah's hand moved as she carefully articulated her parents' names and her Boston address. James observed her pause before uttering the word, spinster, her fingers gripping the edge of Mills's desk with a tension that betrayed her uncertainty. You're certain about this? James murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, meant solely for her ears. "It's not too late to—" "I'm sure," she interrupted, her gaze locking onto his, oddly more confident than I had been regarding the alternative arrangement. The clerk glanced up from his notes. "We require 2 witnesses. Peterson can serve as one, but we will need—" "I'll go get Reverend Thomas," Peterson volunteered with enthusiasm. "He's typically at the church around this hour getting ready for his Sunday sermon." As Peterson rushed out, Mills persisted in his meticulous recording. "Location of residence post-marriage?" "MacKinnon Ranch," James replied, casting a quick look at Sarah. "Unless—" "MacKinnon Ranch," she affirmed, and the warmth in her voice lifted his spirits more than he had felt in years. The office door swung open with a force, revealing Peterson alongside a somewhat disheveled Reverend Thomas, his collar askew as though he had been caught in the act of dressing. "James MacKinnon," the Reverend panted, regaining his composure, "when Peterson here informed me." Well, I could scarcely believe it. Yet, as he gazed upon the 2 of them, he halted, observing them with gentle eyes. At times the divine operates through enigmatic paths. Sarah's fingers brushed against the Bible nestled within her reticule, now a shared treasure between her and James. "Indeed," she replied gently, "he does." With a flourish, Mills completed the license and then looked up, anticipation gleaming in his eyes. "Shall I file this now, or would you prefer to wait until after the ceremony?" James inquired, his gaze fixed on Sarah, allowing her to dictate the moment. She squared her shoulders, embodying the essence of a dignified teacher, even in her travel-worn dress and amidst the emotional upheaval of the afternoon. "Submitted immediately," she instructed with conviction. "We've both waited long enough for happiness." The clerk nodded, his hand moving toward the official seal. The heavy brass stamp descended with a definitive thunk that reverberated through the small room. James observed the ink settling into permanence, solidifying their intentions under the watchful gaze of the law. Marriage license for James Andrew MacKinnon and Sarah Elizabeth Fleming," Mills announced, his voice echoing in the stillness. "Dated August 15th, 1885. He lifted his gaze to meet theirs. "So once I file this, there's no turning back." Sarah reached for the pen, her handwriting flowing with grace and certainty as she inscribed her name. James followed suit, his more rugged script contrasting with hers, mirroring the distinct journeys of their lives converging into one. With George Peterson, the station master, and Reverend William Thomas as witnesses, Mills continued, while the other men added their signatures. "Divine grace shine upon this union." The waning afternoon sun filtered through the office's modest window, illuminating the damp ink as Mills meticulously blotted the signatures. In that golden light, Sarah faced James, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears and an unmistakable glimmer of hope. "Well, Mr. MacKinnon," she said softly, "it appears we find ourselves halfway married." "Indeed we are, Miss Fleming," he responded, extending his arm to her. "Shall we formalize it?" News traveled swiftly through Clearwater. As James and Sarah approached the quaint white church, they found a throng of people assembled on its wooden steps. Women murmured softly, their hands concealing their words, while men stood with their hats respectfully in hand. Nearby, a cluster of children flitted between the tombstones of the adjacent cemetery, their small hands grasping vibrant fistfuls of wild prairie flowers. Young Mary Beth Peterson, the daughter of the station master, approached Sarah with a hint of shyness. Ma'am, we gathered these for you." She presented a bouquet of Indian paintbrush, black-eyed Susans, and prairie sage, bound with a weathered blue ribbon, probably pilfered from a passerby's hair. Sarah knelt, disregarding her skirts as they brushed against the dirt, and accepted the bouquet as though it were the most exquisite roses from a Boston conservatory. "They're beautiful," she murmured, her voice laden with feeling. "Just perfect." The interior of the church enveloped me in a cool, dim embrace infused with the scent of beeswax and the weight of old hymnals. Afternoon light danced through the unadorned stained glass, painting vibrant patches of color upon the time-worn wooden pews. James observed Sarah's gaze drifting toward the vacant front rows, the seats where a bride's family would usually be found. "We can wait," he suggested softly. "Send word to your people in Boston." She shook her head, grasping her untamed bouquet tightly. "My family is here now, being made right here today." Reverend Thomas cleared his throat from the pulpit, his voice resonating with conviction. "Shall we begin?" The townspeople, a motley crew, found their places in the pews, settling in with a mix of anticipation and curiosity. Mrs. Thompson, the wife of the general store owner, had mysteriously conjured a piano accompaniment, despite no one having asked for such a flourish. The well-known notes of the wedding march took on an almost humorous quality in their solemnity, considering the situation. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Thomas commenced, his voice resonating through the rafters, "we are gathered here today to witness something extraordinary, not merely the union of two souls, but the victory of hope over adversity, of faith over trepidation." James stood tall beside Sarah, mindful of Mary's locket nestled in his pocket and the courageous woman at his side, adorned with wildflowers. The air was infused with the fragrance of a prairie summer. "Marriage," the Reverend continued, "is not a venture to be undertaken with frivolity. Some might argue that these two have acted hastily, intertwining their lives after only a few hours of knowing one another. Yet I contend that there are instances when the divine presence is unmistakable, and to question such timing is to embrace doubt instead of wisdom." Sarah's fingers quivered gently around the stems of her bouquet. James extended his hand, steadying them with the assurance of his own weathered touch. "James MacKinnon," Reverend Thomas intoned, "do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To love, honor, and cherish her in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part?" "I do," James's voice resonated softly yet with unwavering conviction, embodying the essence of certainty. "And Sarah Fleming, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? To love him, to honor him, and to cherish him in both sickness and health, in times of wealth and in times of want, until death shall separate you?" Sarah raised her chin, her voice resonating with clarity and strength. "I do." "The rings," Reverend Thomas began, only to pause, suddenly aware that this hurried ceremony lacked the usual arrangements. "Wait," a voice called from the back. Mrs. Thompson hurried forward, pulling something from her finger. "My mother's ring. She'd wish for it to be a token of love." With that, she placed a simple gold band into Sarah's palm. Before James had the chance to utter a word, Station Master Peterson approached, taking off his own wedding ring. "Martha's been gone for 5 years, he remarked, his voice rough around the edges. "She'd box my ears if I didn't offer it." The borrowed rings, warm from their previous owner's touch, passed between James and Sarah, each one imbued with a history of love and loss, ushering in this new beginning. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Thomas declared, his voice heavy with sentiment, "with deep emotion I now pronounce you husband and wife. Since what God has joined together, let no man put asunder." A beam of late afternoon sunlight pierced the clouds, casting a spectrum of colors through the stained glass, illuminating Sarah's face as James leaned in to kiss his bride. Her lips held the essence of tea, mingled with the salt of tears and the weight of unspoken promises. The modest gathering erupted into applause, and Mrs. Thompson began to play a jubilant hymn on the piano. The children who had collected the wildflowers let the petals from their remaining blooms drift away, and the bouquet cradled in Sarah's hands appeared to radiate with the vibrant hues of the prairie summer. As they pivoted to greet their unexpected wedding guests, James caught a faint whisper from Sarah, so soft it could have been a figment of his imagination. "Thank you, Lord, for unanswered prayers that lead us to answered ones." The wagon wheel struck a bump in the road, jolting the wooden seat beneath them. Sarah instinctively grasped the side panel, her wildflower bouquet firmly held in her other hand. James offered a reassuring touch to her elbow. "Apologies for that," he said. "The path becomes challenging beyond the creek crossing." He had intended to address these gaps, but his voice faded, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on him, a realization dawning of all the explanations and apologies that lay ahead. "No need for apologies," Sarah replied, adjusting her skirts. "I may hail from Boston, but I'm not made of porcelain." Her smile softened the impact of her words. The waning sun draped the prairie in a golden hue, stretching elongated shadows over the uneven path. They had departed from the Clearwaters, Sarah's trunk nestled in the Keem, while the wagon's bed bore the weight of James's overlooked supply list. The rhythmic creaking of the wheels signaled the passage of time, harmonizing with the steady cadence of the horses' hoofbeats. "Tell me about the ranch," Sarah inquired, shattering the comfortable silence that enveloped them. "I ought to know what I'm riding into, shouldn't I?" James valued her straightforwardness. 200 acres, predominantly grassland, beneficial for the cattle when the rains arrive. The house requires, Construction was done room by room with Mary Pryor. He cleared his throat. I have around 30 head of cattle, 2 working horses in addition to these, and a handful of chickens. Tommy Wilson, my companion, resides in the weathered cabin by the babbling creek. The wheel struck yet another rut. The protest was louder this time. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. And the finances. The banks are growing restless and the droughts have taken a toll on us all, but... He paused, weighing his words, then resolved that she warranted the complete honesty. Without Mary's meticulous bookkeeping, I've allowed matters to deteriorate. Everything could be lost by winter if things don't shift. To his astonishment, Sarah's expression lit up. Bookkeeping? I manage the accounts. At Miss Prendergast's for 15 years, numbers are like old friends to me. The wagon wheel creaked as they rounded a bend, unveiling the first sight of MacKinnon Ranch in the distance. James observed Sarah's expression intently, noting her reaction to the weathered fence posts, the incomplete north wing of the house, and the cattle congregating at the evening watering hole. It's not much, he started, but she interrupted him. It's everything, she declared with conviction. It's a beginning. The wheel struck another rut, this one more jarring than before. The unsettling wobble in the back axle felt more pronounced than it had that morning. James brought the horses to a halt, a furrow of worry etching his forehead. I should take a look at that wheel. It's been misbehaving lately. He descended, extending his hand to Sarah. Suppose it's time to stretch your legs while I take a look. She acquiesced to his assistance, then lifted her skirts to trail behind him to the back of the wagon. The wheel in question bore the marks of age, its wooden spokes displaying visible signs of strain at the junction with the hub. I can manage it at home, James murmured, more to himself than to Sarah. But it'll need replacing soon, another expense we can't really afford. Sarah knelt beside him, disregarding her dress, and traced a finger along one of the cracks. Like veins in an old hand, are they not? Every one of them whispered tales of adventures embarked upon. James regarded her with astonishment. That's precisely what Mary used to express. She possessed a unique ability to uncover beauty in shattered fragments. Maybe that's what connected us to our chosen partners, Sarah remarked gently, a faint blush creeping across her cheeks at her own audacity. The wheel emitted another creak, as if in agreement. James felt a laugh escape him for the first time in what seemed like years. Miss Fleming, Mrs. MacKinnon, he amended. I believe you might be right. She rose, delicately sweeping dust from her skirts. Sarah, she reminded him. We're married now, after all. Sarah, he echoed, the name rolling off his tongue with a sense of belonging. The wagon wheel creaked once more as they settled back in, yet its protest felt less daunting with her by his side. They pressed on, the wheel's rhythmic cadence punctuating their journey. Sarah's bouquet had started to wilt under the late afternoon sun, yet she clutched it with pride, as if it were a badge of honor. The prairies unfurled before them, adorned in hues of gold and purple by the encroaching sunset. So, will Tommy be surprised? Is it? Sarah inquired abruptly. To discover his employer is married? James chuckled. Probably less surprised than I am. Oh, boys, I've been hearing for months that I need someone to help set things right, he said, casting a glance in her direction, though I doubt even he envisioned it unfolding in this manner. The wheel's rhythm offered a gentle cadence to their soft laughter, its creaking a peculiar melody that whispered, here is a story unfolding. Here is a journey commencing. Here are two lives revolving together, like wooden spokes around a shared axis, growing more resilient through the weight of companionship. The kitchen, Sarah had always thought, was the very soul of any home. In the kitchen of MacKinnon Ranch, as twilight enveloped the world outside, she absorbed every nuance, the wood-burning stove with its capricious damper, shelves adorned with time-worn mason jars, and nearby, a cast-iron skillet that bore the marks of countless meals past. In Mary's pride, James murmured, his eyes tracing her gaze to the skillet. And I brought it all the way from Pennsylvania when we tied the knot. No proper kitchen is complete without one, she mused as she approached the skillet, her finger gliding over its surface. It needs seasoning, she noted thoughtfully, but it's a fine piece. Haven't used it since. James cleared his throat. Been taking meals with Tommy mostly, or making do. The kitchen windows mirrored their tentative movements as they explored this unfamiliar space together. Sarah had taken off her hat and gloves, yet she remained in her traveling dress, now wrinkled and soiled from the journey in the wagon. James lingered hesitantly by the door, as though grappling with his role in this unexpectedly communal space. "Ben, Mr. MacKinnon, James," Sarah corrected herself. "Would you mind if I attempted to prepare us some supper?" His expression was a clear testament to his relief. "Object? I would appreciate that. However, I must caution you, the supplies are quite rudimentary." Sarah was already rolling up her sleeves, inspecting the pantry with a meticulous eye, akin to that of an educator. "Flour, salt, a touch of lard, and eggs gathered from your own chickens?" With a subtle gesture from him, she pressed on. "Is that a ham I see hanging in the back? Tommy's mother occasionally sends one over. She can't stand the thought of me going hungry." "Intelligent woman," Sarah whispered. "Could you please tend to the stove fire while I grab the skillet? And if you wouldn't mind, could you also point me to the well bucket?" The straightforward requests appeared to alleviate James's unease, providing him with a sense of direction. As he approached the stove, Sarah carried the hefty skillet to the wash basin, initiating the task of cleaning. The surface gleamed as the rhythmic scrubbing infused the encroaching darkness with a comforting sound. "Found some potatoes in the root cellar," Tommy's voice echoed from the back door, causing them both to jump. The young man halted abruptly upon catching sight of Sarah in the kitchen, his eyes growing wide with surprise. "Mr. MacKinnon, is this—" "Tommy Wilson," James replied with a sense of gravity. "Allow me to introduce Mrs. Sarah MacKinnon." The boy's jaw dropped in astonishment, quickly transforming into a beaming smile. "Well, I'll be. When you rode into town this morning, I never imagined—" He paused, instinctively adjusting his cap in a gesture of respect. "Welcome, ma'am. We're quite delighted to have you," Sarah said, her smile growing as she responded to his sincere welcome. "Thank you, Tommy. Would you care to join us for supper? I'm trying to breathe new life into this lovely skillet with some ham and potatoes." "Oh, no, ma'am. I couldn't impose on your first—" "Nonsense," she interrupted firmly. "From what I understand, you've been keeping this man fed for 3 years. The minimum I can offer is to reciprocate the kindness." The kitchen slowly embraced a cozy warmth as the flames danced in the stove, and Sarah conjured her culinary enchantment with the skillet. James and Tommy carried in fresh water, darkened the stove, and arranged the rustic wooden table with the ranch's eclectic assortment of plates. The ham crackled in the freshly seasoned skillet, its scent intertwining with the fragrance of frying potatoes, while the cornbread Sarah had miraculously summoned from the scant pantry provisions filled the air. The comforting sounds and aromas appeared to dissolve the awkwardness that lingered among them. "Mary loved cooking too," Tommy ventured during a quiet moment. "She used to say a meal shared was a blessing doubled." James stiffened slightly, but Sarah's hand found his arm. "She appears to possess great wisdom. I hope—" She hesitated, selecting her words with precision. "I hope you'll share more about her when the time feels right. She is woven into the fabric of this home story, after all." The skillet erupted with pops and sizzles, pulling their focus back to the here and now. With a skilled hand, Sarah turned the potatoes, watching as their edges transformed into a delightful golden brown. "First meal in a new home," she murmured, her words drifting into the air like a gentle breeze, meant more for her own reflection than for anyone else. "My mother used to say it sets the tone for all that follows." James stepped closer, positioning himself beside her at the stove, their shoulders almost brushing against one another. "And what tone would you say this one's setting?" Sarah inquired, her gaze drifting to the restored skillet, then to Tommy, who was arranging the table with meticulous care, as the warm light poured from the kitchen windows into the encroaching night. "Hope," she replied at last, "and maybe a touch of magic." The eastern sky was adorned with soft hues of pink as Sarah stumbled upon the morning glories. They ascended the time-worn porch posts, their violet-blue blossoms just starting to unfurl in the dawn's gentle glow. She stood in her nightgown and shawl, observing as each blossom opened, revealing its delicate beauty like a small wonder. "Unmary planted those." James's voice floated gently from behind her, saying every home needed something that opened to greet the sun. Sarah turned to see him already clad for ranch work, yet lingering in the doorway. "They're beautiful," she remarked, as if they were fragments of the sky ensnared in the vine. "I never considered them like that." He stepped onto the porch, mindful to keep an appropriate distance. Their wedding night unfolded in the quiet of separate rooms. He nestled in the barn loft, allowing her the solitude to acclimate to her new home. With the dawn, a fresh understanding of their unusual circumstances emerged. "I've brewed some coffee," Sarah said, "and there are eggs left over from yesterday. Unless you typically share breakfast with Tommy?" No. James ran a hand through his tousled hair, a gesture of frustration mingling with uncertainty. "In all honesty, I typically reach for whatever is within arm's reach." It had been far too long since a proper morning meal graced his table. "Well then," she declared with a briskness that brooked no argument, "Tinsat's changing today." She advanced toward the door but paused, turning to face him once more. "James, I appreciate you allowing me some space last night. That was quite gentlemanly of you." His weathered visage softened. It just felt right. This entire situation between us, it requires time to establish itself. The morning glory swayed softly in the gentle breeze as they entered the building. The kitchen retained the lingering warmth of yesterday's revival, with the cast-iron skillet poised, eager for the tasks of a new day. With a serene grace, Sarah tended to the stove, coaxing the flames to life while she set the coffee to brew. She had donned one of her more modest dresses, suitable for the tasks at hand, yet it still retained the subtle elegance of her former existence. "Should probably give you a heads up," James remarked, taking a seat at the table. "Ammy's probably going to bring his mother by today. News such as this, it will have people reaching out." "Good." Sarah expertly cracked eggs into the skillet. "I would like to introduce myself to our neighbors, particularly Mrs. Wilson, as she has been so attentive to you both." "Attentive?" James's voice carried a note of playful dissent. "We managed just fine." Sarah arched an eyebrow at the neglected shelves, the pile of unlaundered clothes peeking through the bedroom door. "Naturally you did." The laughter they exchanged appeared to dissolve a tension that lingered in the air. In the embrace of dawn, the morning glories engaged in their ritual waltz with the sun, each blossom stretching eagerly toward the radiant glow. "I was pondering," Sarah remarked, gracefully arranging eggs onto their plates, "regarding the north wing you spoke of. The incomplete rooms." James nodded, accepting a cup of coffee. "I once envisioned a future for them, perhaps education for Mary or even a nursery." His voice faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. "Yet that was a different existence. How do you feel about transforming one into a schoolroom?" She sat opposite him, her coffee remaining untouched. "It mentioned that there are children dispersed across the nearby ranches. They surely require education." You truly mean it? Launching a school?" "Sen I do." Her gaze retained the same glimmer he had observed the previous day at the courthouse. "It has the potential to generate income, assist with financial obligations, and every child is entitled to an education, even in this remote area." James observed her intently, his coffee cup cradled in his hands. The morning light streaming through the window illuminated the silver threads in her hair, causing them to glisten like the dew adorning the morning glories outside. "You've got it all figured out already, haven't you?" "Hardly." A smile graced her lips. "But I've come to understand that often the finest plans unfold like the vines outside, stretching toward the light, one blossom at a time." They concluded their breakfast in a serene quiet, the gentle cadence of a ranch morning wafting in through the open windows. The distant pastures echoed with the lowing of cattle, while the yard was alive with the clucking of chickens, and from the barn the cheerful notes of Tommy's whistling floated through the air. "Well," James remarked at last, rising to confront the tasks ahead, "I'd say this surpasses snatching whatever's available." Sarah commenced collecting the dishes, her actions confident and deliberate. "Tomorrow I'll make biscuits, and perhaps we can clear one of those north rooms." He paused at the door, observing her. She had let her hair down for the night, and it had yet to be fully pinned up. The loose strands shimmered in the morning light, reminiscent of the delicate threads of morning glory vines. "Sarah?" She pivoted, her hands submerged in the soapy water of the dishpan. "Yes? I'm pleased you chose not to turn back at Chicago, or Omaha, or any of those other stops." Her smile unfolded gradually, warm and confident, akin to flowers welcoming the sun. "So am I, James MacKinnon. So am I." 3 days following their spontaneous wedding, the MacKinnons' wagon creaked into Clearwater seeking provisions. With her second-best dress adorning her figure, Sarah sat upright next to James, exuding a quiet resolve. The ledger of the general store would capture their inaugural purchases as a married couple. a moment that was both ordinary and profoundly significant. "Ready?" James inquired, assisting her as she descended from the wagon. "As ready as I'll ever be," Sarah responded, delicately brushing the dust from her skirts. Even now, she noticed the curtains fluttering in the shop windows, inquisitive faces glancing in their direction. The bell tolls above Thompson's General. A store announces their entrance. Mrs. Thompson glanced up from her spot behind the counter, diligently recording entries in the store's hefty ledger. "Well," she said with a welcoming smile, "if it isn't our newest bride proudly displaying Martha Peterson's ring, no less." Sarah caressed the borrowed wedding band, its surface gleaming with a gentle luster. "I hope to do it justice, Mrs. Thompson. Emma, I implore you." "Indeed you have, my dear." Herbert Crawford's mother has visited this place thrice. Her demeanor as bitter as curdled cream, fixated on that train schedule. "Serves her right, if you ask me," James said, clearing his throat. "We've arrived for provisions, Emma. Sarah intends to establish a proper household." Mrs. Thompson's face lit up as she drew the ledger closer. "And let us turn the page for the MacKinnon household," she said. "What do you require, my dear?" Sarah unveiled a meticulously crafted list. "And need fabric for curtains, if you have any, or sugar, coffee, lamp oil, thread, buns for mending." She paused, then continued. "And perhaps some primer books, if you have them in stock." "Primers?" Emma's eyebrows arched in surprise. "So, you're planning to start that school already, are you?" "Word travels fast," James remarked with a hint of sarcasm. "Quicker than summer lightning in this town." Emma commenced the meticulous task of recording entries in her ledger. Indeed, a fortunate circumstance. The youngest Wilson could certainly benefit from some education. Sharp as a tack, that child, yet as untamed as the wild prairie. While Emma collected their supplies, other patrons began to filter in. Sarah sensed their gazes upon her, catching snippets of their hushed discussions. She immersed herself in the examination of fabric bolts, engaging in discussions about prices and qualities with Emma, as though it were second nature. "Your credit's good here, James," Emma remarked when the total was recorded in the ledger. "Always has been." Sarah placed her hand gently on James's arm, and he might voice his objections. "When we will pay what we can at this moment," she declared with conviction, "and devise a plan for the remainder if you are inclined." Emma's admiration clearly deepened. "Just as Mary did," she murmured gently. Her books were the epitome of cleanliness, unmatched by any in the town. She pivoted the ledger in Sarah's direction. "Look at this." Her final entry from 3 years back, immaculate like it was printed. Sarah examined the meticulous columns, the exact figures. She had a remarkable affinity for numbers. "But the best, Sanaya assisted many of the ranchers in this area with maintaining their accounts," Emma remarked, her eyes drifting into a contemplative gaze. "You know, if you're considering teaching, there could be a demand for adult lessons as well, bookkeeping, numbers, that sort of thing." The bell chimed once more, welcoming Mrs. Crawford and her eldest daughter. The store fell into silence. Sarah sensed the tension radiating from James, yet she maintained a calm demeanor. "That's an excellent suggestion, Emma. Would you care to join me for tea to discuss this matter sometime?" Mrs. Crawford crafted, a faint murmur of discontent, yet Sarah remained unmoved. Instead, she observed Emma as she meticulously recorded their purchases in the ledger, each item serving as a brick in the foundation of their new life. Material for drapes to gently diffuse the morning glow, foundations for budding intellects, sweetness for cookies that would fill a dwelling with the warmth of familiarity. "Here's your change," Emma remarked, meticulously counting out the coins. Then, with a voice that resonated through the air, "And welcome to Clearwater, Mrs. MacKinnon. We're fortunate to have you." They carefully placed their purchases into the wagon, all while the town observed with keen interest. Sarah sensed the murmurs, felt the gazes upon her, yet she maintained her poise. Allow them to speak. Allow them to witness the grace with which a woman of 42 conducts herself. As James assisted her onto the wagon seat, she glimpsed their reflection in the shop window. A towering seasoned rancher stands beside his wife, whose urban upbringing contrasts sharply with his rugged demeanor. Yet the ledger had chronicled their initial acquisitions as a couple, signifying the dawn of a fresh chapter, a union of pragmatic necessities and optimistic spirits. "Ready to head home?" James inquired softly. "Home," and a word so simple, yet it encapsulates such complexity. Sarah adjusted her bonnet against the afternoon sun. Yes, she replied. I believe I am. In the background, Emma Thompson inscribed one last entry in her ledger. In the inaugural shop of the MacKinnons as a married couple. A perfect match, if ever there was one. The old brass school bell made its entrance on a Tuesday nearly 3 weeks post-wedding. Tommy discovered it nestled in his mother's attic, a relic from Clearwater's inaugural schoolhouse, long overshadowed by the newer brick edifice in town. It has a beautiful resonance, Sarah remarked, gliding her fingers across the bell's weathered exterior. She stood in the north wing of what was once the ranch house, now reshaped by sheer will and hard work. The windows were adorned with new curtains, while unpretentious benches completed the scene. Fashioned by James and Tommy in the twilight hours, they adorned the walls. But Mom says it has inspired 3 generations of children to embrace learning, Tommy suggested. I believe it still holds a bit of magic, James mused from the doorway, observing as Sarah delicately hung the bell by the window. In the weeks following their swift union, he observed his struggling ranch start to thrum with renewed vitality. The house, once a testament to sorrow, now wafted the inviting aromas of freshly baked bread and polished wood. Sarah's meticulous entries brought clarity to the account books, organizing years of disarrayed records. First class begins on Monday, Sarah remarked, taking a step back to appreciate. Positioning of the bell. The Wilson trio, the Henderson twins, and young Mary Beth Peterson. 6 students to start. 7, Tommy corrected, shuffling his feet. If you're open to teaching someone a bit older, I've been eager to learn my figures correctly. Sarah's face brightened. Tommy, I would be truly honored, she said as she turned to James. And you'll join us for the evening sessions? Emma Thompson has arranged for 3 other ranchers' wives to come learn bookkeeping. James nodded, still astonished at how swiftly she had intertwined herself into the very fabric of the community. On the previous Sunday, she had gathered a sewing circle on the porch, where the lively chatter of women intertwined with the rhythmic clicking of needles, all working together to create curtains and cushions. The ranch appeared to come alive in her company. The vegetable garden, once overrun with weeds, now flourished with tidy rows of late summer plantings. The chicken coop had been mended, and the hens were now laying eggs with renewed vigor. Even the once problematic north fence stood tall once more, a testament to Sarah's keen eye for detail that uncovered a mistake in the supply ledger, allowing for the purchase of new posts. James, Sarah's voice broke through his reverie. Would you test the bell, see if it still has its voice? He stepped forward, grasping the bell's rope in his hand. The clear, bright tone that resonated across the prairie stirred an unexpected lump in his throat. How long had it been since these walls had known anything but silence? Perfect, Sarah exhaled softly. Then, noticing his expression, she asked, "Sure you all right?" He replied slowly, "Just thinking about what Mary used to say, about how a home needs 3 things, love to warm it, work to maintain it, and dreams to help it grow." Sarah's hand found his, their borrowed wedding rings touching. Wise words. She would have liked you, James remarked unexpectedly. Or perhaps she would have appreciated how you've managed to bring all 3 back here. Tommy, ever the diplomat, found something intriguing to observe outside the window as tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "I hope," she murmured gently, "that somewhere she knows her home is being cherished once more." The bell's rope swayed lightly in the breeze from the open window, casting a playful shadow across the freshly swept floor. The afternoon sun bathed the prairie grass in a golden hue, while cattle grazed serenely in the distance. The echo of horses in the barn served as a reminder that the demands of ranch life persisted, even amidst the significance of this day. "Best get back to it," Tommy remarked, adjusting the brim of his hat. "Those fence posts won't set themselves." After he departed, Sarah approached the freshly mounted blackboard, meticulously inscribing the upcoming week's lessons in her graceful script. James observed her for a moment, captivated by the way she seamlessly belonged to the space that had previously been designated for a different purpose, a different existence. "Is that you, Sarah?" She pivoted, her fingers dusted with chalk. "Yes, thank you. For seeing possibility where I could only see loss," she smiled. That warm, confident smile that had first captured his attention at the train station. "Said as the role of teachers, Mr. MacKinnon. We gaze into vacant spaces, envisioning the stories yet to unfold." The school bell captured the waning afternoon glow, its brass sheen glimmering like a vow. As Monday dawns, its sound will echo across the vast prairie, summoning children to embrace knowledge, women to refine their skills in accounting, and one thankful rancher to tally his blessings. Serendipitous gifts. Yet in this moment, it stood as a quiet observer to two souls discovering that love, much like knowledge, transcends the boundaries of age, just the boundless potential of starting anew. The tempest arrived unannounced, casting the October afternoon into a darkness as deep as ink. As Sarah stood before her class, imparting knowledge, the first gust of wind struck with a ferocity that rattled the schoolroom windows, causing young Mary Beth Peterson to dissolve into tears. "Class dismissed," Sarah declared, her voice unwavering as thunder rumbled ominously above. "Tommy, assist the children home before—" The remainder of her sentence was swallowed by a fierce explosion from the northern pasture. James burst through the door, droplets of rain cascading from his hat. "And the fences are down. It seems lightning must have struck." Catalyst spooked. Sarah was already in motion, swapping her teaching shawl for an oilskin coat. "How many are headed for the break? Are you really going to wear that out?" "How many?" Her voice allowed for no dissent. "At least 30 head. And Tommy and I can't manage alone." Another crash of thunder punctuated his statement, then it found its place. With a graceful motion, Sarah gathered her skirts, deftly pinning them up in preparation for her ride. "Mary Beth, lead the others to the storm cellar. There exists bread and water in that place. Stay inside until one of us is back." The wind almost swept them off their feet as they ventured out into the open. Rain cascaded in sharp torrents, while lightning illuminated the heavens, transforming the night into a fleeting spectacle of brilliance and dread. Through the relentless downpour, Sarah caught sight of the shattered fence post, split and smoldering, a stark reminder of the lightning's fierce strike. Beyond it, frantic cattle were already surging through the opening. "Take the south side," James shouted above the tempest's fury. "Tommy and I will try to turn them at the creek." Sarah mounted the mare James had been training her to ride, her heart racing, yet her grip on the reins remained firm. 3 weeks of riding lessons had not equipped her for this moment, but the urgency of the situation demanded a newfound bravery. The cattle loomed like shadowy figures in the downpour, their eyes wide and glistening with terror. Sarah pressed her horse onward, channeling the commanding tone she had observed in James. "Greetings. Retreat at once, you misguided souls." Lightning illuminated Tommy in the distance, his horse battling the fierce wind as he endeavored to intercept the lead steer. The fractured fence post loomed like a pointed accusation against the heavens, signifying the moment their defense against disorder had crumbled. A young cow broke away from the herd, making a beeline for a steep ravine. Without a moment's hesitation, Sarah urged her mare into a gallop, the reins whipping against her face as she sped forward to intercept. Amidst the howling wind, she caught the distant echoes of James's shouts, yet the tempest whisked his words into oblivion. The mare appeared to grasp their intent, reacting to Sarah's faintest cues. With a deftness that seemed almost miraculous, they maneuvered in front of the frantic cow, guiding it back toward the herd in a way that would have been unthinkable just a month prior. "Well done," Tommy's voice echoed softly amidst the tempest. He had successfully turned the lead steer, and gradually the rest of the cattle began to circle, their fear subsiding as the reassuring presence of riders enveloped them. James emerged through the downpour, his expression a blend of concern and pride. "Sarah, you—" The crack of thunder echoed, the lightning flashing nearer this time. Sarah's mare reared, yet the countless hours spent guiding restless children had bestowed upon her an unwavering balance. With deft precision she reined in the horse, directing her gaze toward the oncoming cattle that were steadily making their way toward the gap. For what seemed like an eternity, they toiled amidst the tempest's wrath. The fractured fence post emerged as their gathering point, a steadfast beacon as they gradually rounded up the dispersed herd. Sarah felt a dull ache in her arms. Her dress clung heavily beneath the oilskin, yet a fierce joy surged within her. She thrives in her role, collaborating with her husband as a true equal partner. At last, the final steer was redirected. James had gathered spare posts from the barn, crafting makeshift repairs to the fence line. The tempest surged eastward, unleashing its wrath upon the vast expanse of the open prairie. "I've never witnessed anything quite like this," Tommy remarked, assisting Sarah as she dismounted from her mare. Wherever you guide that heifer, Mrs. MacKinnon, it's as if you've been in the saddle forever. In it, books aren't the only teachers, Sarah replied, her legs trembling now that the crisis had subsided. Sometimes life insists we acquire new skills in a hurry. James was inspecting the shattered fence post, a look of concern etched on his face. We could have lost half the herd if you hadn't been here, but I was. Sarah stepped closer, standing beside him, both finding solace in each other's presence, a silent acknowledgement that they could weather any storm together. The post's splintered wood mirrored their own journeys, fractured paths that, when reassembled, held the promise of resilience. "You're shivering," James observed, shrugging off his coat to drape it around her shoulders. "Yes, well," Sarah managed to smile, "I don't remember this being part of my teaching credentials." His laugh was a rough blend of relief and something more profound. "Sarah MacKinnon, you are truly remarkable, and I don't believe I've ever witnessed a city woman embrace the life of a rancher. Live as you have." "Perhaps," she replied gently. "I was just waiting for the right ranch." The letter arrived 6 weeks after the wedding, its Boston postmark and elegant handwriting instantly recognizable to Sarah. She held her sister Rebecca's letter in trembling hands, standing in the kitchen where morning sun streamed through her newly hung curtains. "Something wrong?" James inquired, halting in the threshold with a bundle of firewood cradled in his arms. "Shit, not wrong, exactly." Sarah traced her sister's familiar script. "Just unexpected. I penned a letter to my family following our union, but I hadn't genuinely anticipated." James placed the wood down with care. "Do you desire a moment of solitude to peruse it?" "No," she replied swiftly. "No, I want you here." The paper rustled as she unfolded it, Rebecca's words pouring forth like a torrent. "Dearest Sarah, your letter arrived yesterday, and I must admit I was so taken aback that I accidentally shattered Mother's finest teacup. Married to a rancher, Sonore, pragmatic, and composed Sarah, who consistently asserted that romance was the domain of the younger crowd. I scarcely know whether to chastise you for such rashness or commend your bravery." Sarah's voice wavered. James moved closer, his presence steady and warm at her shoulder. "Please continue," he urged gently. "Mother, naturally, is scandalized. But when is she not?" Father remained silent at first, seated in his study for what felt like an eternity. Then he stepped out and declared that any man capable of recognizing your worth at a mere glance must indeed be someone worth knowing. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. James's hand found hers, their borrowed wedding rings brushing against one another. "I've enclosed something," Rebecca's letter continued. "So I found it in that trunk of grandmother's things. It's not much, but perhaps it will help make your new house feel more like home." A small daguerreotype slipped from the envelope. The Nerstand's grandmother on her own wedding day, proud in her 43rd year, beside the grandfather who loved her until his dying day. "She married late as well," Sarah murmured. "I had nearly forgotten that." Mother never approved, but they were so happy together. James studied the image. "You have her smile, that same look of knowing your own mind." Sarah leaned into his shoulder, letting his strength support her as she read on. Rebecca's words painted their Boston life in vivid detail. In the dramas of the mother's garden club, the father's latest academic pursuits, and the family cat's ongoing war with the baker's dog. "And they're still there," Sarah remarked with a sense of awe. "All my old life just carries on, yet it feels like a narrative about someone else now." "And do you feel remorse for it? What do you think?" James inquired softly. "Exchanging brick walls for the gentle embrace of prairie winds." Sarah surveyed her surroundings. "And the kitchen, with herbs drying from the rafters, the students' drawings tacked by the window, the comfortable clutter of a life being built together." "No," she replied with conviction, "but I'm relieved to know they aren't completely gone." "Rebecca mentioned she might come by in the spring, if we're open to it." "Naturally we are." James's tone was inviting. "Though we ought to give her a heads up about Tommy's singing. I wouldn't want to scare her off back east." Sarah chuckled, then her expression turned pensive. "James, could you share more about your family, about Marries? It seems fitting today." He fell silent for a while. Then his hand moved toward Mary's locket, now resting proudly on the mantel. "Mary had a sister as well. Caroline resides in Pennsylvania, surrounded by her 4 sons and a husband who crafts furniture. So they spent the morning exchanging tales, intertwining their distinct pasts into a collective narrative. Sarah discovered the story of James's younger brother, who had passed away in his youth, learned of Mary's father, who instilled in her a passion for horses, and heard about the aunt who gifted them the cast-iron skillet on their wedding day. In return, she recounted tales of Rebecca's childhood escapades, of her father's fervent discussions with his university peers, of the grandmother who, at the age of 43, chose love over convention and never looked back. "Family isn't merely defined by blood," James remarked at last, as he held up the daguerreotype. "It's a choice as well. The individuals we surround ourselves with, the narratives we decide to preserve." Sarah reflected on her students, on Tommy and his mother, on Emma Thompson and the ladies of the sewing circle. "Indeed," she concurred, "it's a tapestry we weave from all the threads life gives us." The morning sun caught the daguerreotype's silver surface, reflecting like a mirror of possibility. In it, Sarah could see her grandmother's joy, her own present contentment, and the future stretching out before them, a future rich with both old memories and new stories waiting to be lived. And the harvest moon loomed low and golden above the prairie, casting elongated shadows across the MacKinnon ranch. Sarah sat in her rocking chair by the fire, carefully stitching the final piece of their first quilt together. The pattern was her own design, morning glories and prairie grass, intertwined in a delicate ballet of east and west. "That's fine work," James murmured gently, halting his evening calculations to observe her hands at play. The ledgers now revealed a glimmer of hope. Sarah's bookkeeping classes had generated sufficient additional income to lighten their financial strain with the bank. "It's our story," she replied, holding up the nearly finished quilt. "To observe these blue fragments, they originate from my teaching dress in Boston, and these brown ones are remnants of your old work shirt, the very one that snagged on the fence last month." James stepped nearer, his calloused fingers, gently tracing the intricate pattern. "And this bright yellow, the ribbon in Mary Beth Peterson's hair, she insisted I wear it, claiming it would infuse our dreams with sunshine." Sarah smiled at the recollection. "And the children have grown rather possessive of our home." Indeed, the ranch had undergone a transformation with the arrival of harvest season. The schoolroom now proudly hosted 12 regular students, their lessons marked by the crisp chime of the brass bell. In the evening, adult classes had expanded as well, with ranchers' wives exchanging recipes and life lessons alongside their bookkeeping studies. "Tommy's mother sent word," James remarked, leaning back in his chair. "They've had a good yield this year, and she wants to share some preserves, considering it payment for teaching Tommy his figures." Sarah tied off her thread, recalling Tommy's proud face when he had first calculated his own wages correctly. "He's a quick study. He might make a fine teacher himself someday." The quilt spread across her lap, resembling a map of their merged lives. Here lay a square from Mrs. Thompson's sewing basket. Beneath a piece of the curtains that Mary had hung years ago, and in the backing held its own tale. Fabric intended for Sarah's wedding dress to Herbert Crawford, now transformed for a more genuine love. "The harvest. Festival's next week," James mentioned, his pencil scratching against the ledger. "Sounds anticipating our presence." Sarah replied, while adding another meticulous stitch. "Mrs. Henderson inquired if I would assist in judging the preserves competition, and Tommy's mother is requesting our quilt and for the crafts display." "Our quilt?" James glanced upward, taken aback. "He handled everything." "But it's our story," Sarah replied with a quiet conviction. "Every piece selected in unison, every memory cherished." Since she lifted the nearly completed masterpiece, moonlight and firelight dancing upon its surface. "Observe how the pattern unfolds, reminiscent of morning glories ascending a fence post." James placed his ledger aside and knelt beside her chair. In the flickering light, she could see the softness in his eyes that appeared more and more these days. "Ben, you arrived at that station," he said quietly. "So I thought I was offering you shelter. Never dreamed you'd bring so much life back to this place." Sarah's fingers brushed against a worn patch of calico, a remnant of Mary's old apron, preserved by James throughout the years. "So we've created something fresh," she said, "from fragments of what once was, like this quilt, not obliterating the past, but intricately weaving it into our future." It's outside, the harvest moon cast a silvery glow over the vast prairie. Then freshly mended fence posts stood tall and resilient, scarcely revealing the scars of the lightning's fury. Inside the barn, the sound of Tommy completing the evening chores echoed softly, his joyful whistling dancing through the crisp autumn air. "Almost done," Sarah murmured, "working on the final corner, and the quilt would be ready for the festival, a testament to how life could weave together beauty from fragments of joy and sorrow, hope and memory." And James observed her diligently, his ledger slipping from his mind. "Do you recall what Mary used to say about quilts?" Sarah's hands paused. "Tell me," she said. "They were akin to marriages, stronger for being composed of various pieces, all united through patience and care." Sarah tied off her last stitch, then held out her hand to her husband. Together they unfurled the quilt, allowing it to embrace the intertwined glow of moonlight and flames. Sarah's borrowed wedding rings glinted as they worked, no longer feeling borrowed at all. "There," Sarah said softly, "finished, just in time for the cold nights ahead." James gathered her close, the quilt wrapped around them both. "Not finished," he corrected gently. "Just another piece of our story, ready for the next chapter." The December arrived with bitter winds and deep snows that transformed the prairie into a vast white sea. Inside the MacKinnon ranch house, Sarah stumbled upon James's secret project one evening, while tending to the fire. A half-carved chess set, cleverly concealed behind his ledgers, each piece reveals itself from raw wood with patient skill. "It was intended as a Christmas surprise," James confessed, discovering her with the knight cradled in her hands, a means to occupy the lengthy winter nights. Sarah ran her fingers along the horse's elegant contours. "I had no idea you possessed such carving skills. And Mary's father taught me," said every rancher, "that one must find something to occupy their time when the snow's too deep for regular work." He extracted the remaining pieces, pawns resembling tiny fence posts, a queen draped in a teacher's shawl, a king sporting a distinctly familiar broad-brimmed hat, and a hut. "They're us," Sarah realized, scrutinizing each figure. "All of us. Look, this bishop has Tommy's smile." The howling wind rattled the windows, but their kitchen was warm with lamplight and shared discovery. James brought out his carving tools, and Sarah watched as he worked on the final piece, a rook fashioned after the old-school bell tower. "My father taught me chess," she said, believing it was essential for a woman to think strategically. "And Mother was scandalized, of course. It appears your father was quite astute." James blew wood shavings from the diminutive bell tower. "You certainly navigated the strategy of this ranch with skill." Their tranquil moment was abruptly disturbed by a frantic knocking at the door. Tommy burst in, snow dusting his shoulders. "Wolf tracks by the south pasture," he exclaimed. "Fresh ones, and the cattle are restless." James was already reaching for his coat. Sarah rose as well, but he shook his head. "Quite this time, no. The tempest is intensifying." "I'll keep the lamps burning," she vowed, understanding he needed to concentrate on the wolves. "But do not concern yourself with her. And warmth, and bricks for your beds when you return." The door closed behind them with a chilling sense of finality. Sarah added wood to the fire, then gathered blankets and began heating bricks in the oven. And the chess pieces observed from the table, their incomplete shapes offering a peculiar solace in their flaws, and 10 hours crept by. Sarah kept herself busy, first preparing hot coffee and sandwiches for when the men returned, then grading her students' arithmetic papers by lamplight. Saint de Wind's voice intensified, and she grasped the carved queen, drawing fortitude from its steadfast form. At last, as midnight approached, boots thudded against the porch. James and Tommy entered, snow-laden yet victorious. "I drove them off," Tommy reported, his teeth chattering. "Mr. MacKinnon's shot sent them fleeing all the way to the next county." Sarah held hot coffee in her hands before she could finish stamping the snow from her boots. As she warmed herself by the fire, she noticed James eyeing the chess pieces still scattered across the table. "Not much of a Christmas surprise now," he said ruefully. On the contrary, Sarah placed the queen next to the king. "They're perfect, much like us, still molded by time and circumstance, yet undeniably stronger together." And Tommy scrutinized the sculpture that bore his resemblance. "Would you be willing to teach me to play, Mrs. MacKinnon? The winter evenings can stretch on endlessly in the cabin. Together, we shall all learn," she resolved. Incorporated into the evening lessons, a blend of strategy and mathematics. Later, After Tommy had departed with a warm brick and even warmer thanks, Sarah and James sat before the fire, the chest set position between them. Outside, the storm raged, but it couldn't touch the peace they had built within these walls. "And I've been thinking," James said, moving a pawn carefully. About Christmas, about family." Sarah waited, sensing that there was more to come. "Satan, I wrote to Mary's sister Caroline, inquiring if she and the boys might be interested in visiting come spring. I considered, if he hesitated, Sister Rebecca comes too, and could be lovely to host a true family gathering, to reveal to them all what we've created here." Sarah felt her heart swell. This was the very thing she'd journeyed west for, yearning to discover not merely a union, but a sense of belonging, an opportunity to create something grander than her own existence. "Check," she murmured, her fingers gliding over the board as she advanced her bishop. "Then yes, let's bring them all together. Demonstrate how love can shape beauty from the unrefined elements that life provides." James examined the board, then smiled. "Much like this chess set, still a work in progress, yet already narrating our tale." "And what tale is that?" He seized her bishop into with his knight. "That occasionally finest moves in life are those we never anticipated, when they are the choices we embrace when the moment demands bravery." Sarah gazed at the intricately carved pieces. In the warm glow of the fire, illuminating her husband's face, and the snow swirling past windows that now felt like shields rather than barriers. "Checkmate," she declared, shifting her queen with a flourish. "And yes, my love, yes to everything." The new garden tools had finally arrived, carried in by the first warm breeze of March, a wedding gift long postponed by the relentless grip of winter storms. Sarah unwrapped them with a sense of reverence on the kitchen table, a sharp spade, a sturdy rake, a gleaming trowel, each one adorned with an engraving. "For Sarah MacKinnon from the ladies of Clearwater, sent, it appears they've ultimately made the decision that you're here to stay," James remarked, observing her organize the tools with the care of a jeweler. As if there had ever been any uncertainty, Sarah traced her fingers over the engraving. Not Mrs. James MacKinnon, nor the new Mrs. MacKinnon, but her own name, her own identity, acknowledged and cherished. The morning glories she had sown last autumn are already breaking through the earth and beside the porch, their tendrils stretching toward the embracing sun. Soon they would ascend the very posts where Mary's vines had flourished, weaving their own narrative into the tapestry of the ranch's legacy. "Rebecca's letter arrived yesterday," Sarah remarked, arranging the tools in a tidy line. "She'll be here next week, and Caroline has written that she and the boys will follow the week after." James nodded, his expression contemplative. The ranch had changed since Caroline's last visit. When Mary was, he trailed off, yet Sarah understood. "We've honored her memory," she said softly, "made something new. Without erasing what came before, the proof was all around them. Mary's locket still held its place of honor, but now it sat beside Sarah's grandmother's daguerreotype. A cast iron skillet presented biscuits, crafted from a blend of Mary's recipe and Sarah's Boston variations. And the quilt they had crafted together lay gracefully across their bed, a tapestry of old memories and new dreams woven into one comforting embrace. Their first anniversary was approaching, not the traditional paper milestone, but one marked by transformed spaces and healed hearts. The schoolroom now featured 20 students, with Tommy serving as an assistant teacher in between his ranch duties. And evening accounting classes had proven instrumental in helping 3 neighboring ranches steer clear of foreclosure. "I've got something to show you," James said suddenly. "I've been waiting for the right moment." He guided her to the barn, where the morning sun poured in through the lofty windows. In a corner, beside Mary's old saddle, stood a new one, tooled leather, gleaming with fresh oil. "I had it made in town," James explained. "Say thought it was time you had your own, properly fitted." And after that storm rescue last fall, Sarah touched the saddle reverently. Like the garden tools, it bore her name, but this time in James's own careful hand, carved into the leather like a declaration of belonging. "The ranch is showing a profit," she said, her voice thick with emotion. for the first time in 4 years, as noted in the ledgers. We could have allocated these funds for what nobler cause than this, than James interrupted gently. You've put down, and roots here, Sarah, deep ones. This is merely my way of expressing, I recognize that, I respect that. Through the barn door, the schoolroom windows sparkled in the morning light. The brass bell would soon ring, summoning their expanding family of students to lessons. The garden tools, heavy in the kitchen, stood poised to assist in cultivating new life in soil that had rested for far too long. I've been pondering, Sarah spoke with deliberation, about the nursery room, the one you and Mary envisioned previously. James remained utterly still beside her. Perhaps, she continued carefully, it's time to use it. And not as we originally thought, but I've received letters from 3 families inquiring if we could accommodate their children for the upcoming term. The youth are too far removed to embark on the daily journey. She sensed James exhale a breath. He likely hadn't realized he was holding unique form of nursery, cultivating intellects rather than caring for infants. Life seldom delivers us precisely what we envision, Sarah remarked, reflecting on that distant train station, but occasionally it offers us exactly what we require. And they strolled back to the house side by side, passing the morning glory sprouts that stretched eagerly toward the sun. The garden tools glimmered in the light as they stepped into the kitchen, etching a reminder of the journey they had undertaken. Rebecca will want to assist in planting the garden, Sarah contemplated, and Caroline's boys can help tidy the nursery room, creating a family. Project family, James echoed, the term laden with significance. When I saw you sitting at that station, I thought I was offering you shelter. I never imagined you would be the one to help me create all of this. Sarah grasped the spade, assessing its heft. Much like their love, it stood both strong and radiant, functional yet cherished. Maybe that's the key, she mused, not merely creating a refuge, but nurturing something fresh in unison. Year to the day after their first meeting, James and Sarah MacKinnon found themselves once more at Clearwater Station. The August sun blazed with the same intensity. The wooden bench remained as weathered as ever, yet everything else had transformed. It's hard to believe a year has passed, Sarah remarked, her fingers brushing against the new gold band tucked away in her apron pocket. Sene had selected the rings together the previous week, simple circles adorned with engravings of morning glories, meant to replace the borrowed ones that had accompanied them through their first year. And the station clock that had borne witness to their hurried choice continued to tick unwaveringly above them. Yet the platform was now alive with familiar faces. Tommy and his mother, their students and their families, Caroline's, boys darting around Rebecca, who had chosen to prolong her stay indefinitely, after discovering her passion for both teaching and Tommy Wilson. All had come to witness the moment we should have embraced more fully, James reflected, his own new ring radiating warmth in his pocket. Emma Thompson bustled forward with Sarah's original trunk, finally collected from storage. "Senai found something you might like," she said, revealing Sarah's never-worn wedding dress. "I thought you might appreciate wearing it today, given that you never had the opportunity." Sarah touched the fabric thoughtfully, then shook her head. That dress belonged to another life, another dream. She smoothed her blue silk, a gift from James, chosen together in town. "This is who I am now." The brass school bell had been carried to the station, and now Tommy rang it instead of the traditional wedding chimes. Students scattered flower petals, morning glories and prairie roses as James and Sarah walked to where Reverend Thomas waited. "Dearly beloved," he began, just as he had a year ago, "we gathered today not to join these two in marriage, for God in their own brave hearts did that last year. We come together instead, to honor the way love can flourish and from the most unforeseen instances, how happiness can emerge from grief, and how two souls that can discover a sanctuary in one another, despite the whims of time." Sarah's sister Rebecca, Shanna wiped away her tears. Caroline's youngest boy proudly carried their new rings on a cushion made from a square of their storytelling quilt. Even Mrs. Crawford stood at the back of the crowd, her expression softened by time, a testament to the triumph of true love. "These rings," Reverend Thomas continued, holding them up, "and represent not the beginning of the journey, but its continuation. They're symbols of a love, already proven. A struggling cowboy widower meets too old bride left at station, marries her that day. through storms and wolves, through drought and plenty, through the joining of two lives into something greater than either could have been alone. James's hand was steady as he positioned the new ring on Sarah's finger, sliding it alongside the borrowed one that would soon be returned with gratitude. For with this ring, I reaffirm my vow to love you, to honor you, and to express gratitude each day for leading me to this moment. Sarah's voice remained unwavering as she mirrored the sentiment, the morning glory engravings glistening in the sunlight. And with this ring, I reaffirm my vow to love you, to honor you, and to forever cherish the bravery that allowed us to start anew. The borrowed rings and solemnly returned to their rightful owners, and Mrs. Thompson and Station Master Peterson, both wiping away tears. And the brass bell tolled once more, its sound echoing across the vast prairie that had come to be Sarah's true sanctuary. Look, James murmured, gesturing toward the station's periphery, where morning glories had emerged, their azure blooms stretching skyward. Whether born from seeds whisked by the wind or left behind by Sarah during that pivotal encounter, they had found a foothold in the most unexpected of locales, much like love itself. Life has a peculiar way of surprising us, Tommy remarked at the celebration that followed. It's fascinating how the darkest day can transform into the brightest, provided you're courageous enough to embrace it. Sarah surveyed the assembly of loved ones, a tapestry woven from blood ties and heartfelt connections, students and neighbors alike, all united by a single, spontaneous choice rooted in faith. That's not amusing, she corrected gently. Miraculous. The new rings caught the light as James took her hand, their engraved morning glories a permanent reminder that love, like flowers, could bloom in any season. Saintly old station clock ticked above them, no longer marking time until an eastbound train, but measuring instead the moments of a life rich with purpose and joy. Ready to go home? James asked. Sarah smiled at the man who had seen not a stranded spinster, but a woman of worth and wisdom. My love, she said, I already am.